Welcome to the Blue Feathered Stories. I'm your hostess, Blue Thunderbird Woman, also known as Carol. I promised you in our last episode that we would start a mini series on the stories of money. It is time for us, as humanity, to take our power back from money. We are the ones who created it. We are the ones who can take that power away. And so it is time. So for the next several episodes, I will have the privilege of sharing sacred space with some beautiful soul sisters and talking about our money stories and how we are changing that, how we are stepping into our power, taking the power back from money and making differences and changes in the world. And so today I'm super excited to have Chrissey Merritt with me today. Oh my goodness. Chrissey is one of those soul sisters I've known actually for 10, 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. I've had the privilege to collaborate with her in some retreats that I used to offer. And Chrissey is one of those divine humans on the earth that is making a difference one step at a time, one action at a time. And she's just such a beautiful soul. I am so honored to be sharing space with her. And she wears many hats. Oh my goodness, so many hats. She's an interior designer. She's a mother, a wife. She runs a yoga studio. She's a fantastic, accomplished artist. Oh my goodness. And I'm sure she has a beautiful community in plant medicines, culture knot, and network marketing. I mean, this woman is busy. She's got lots of hats that she wears. And yeah, so looking from the outside in, we may think that money is not an issue. However, we all have our money stories. So I'm so happy and so really honored to have you here, Chrissey, with me sharing sacred space. So welcome to the listeners who are going to be tapping in and just welcome into the space.
Thank you so much. I feel emotional after that. Um, oh, thank you. That was a really nice introduction. It's interesting when you hear somebody else talk about you.
Yeah, how that
'Cause-
actually feels, right? Like it's like, oh,
yeah,
really? Am
yeah,
I all those things?
yeah. I mean, you're just in it, right? And
Yeah,
then, yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
So
It's an honor.
welcome.
It's an honor to be here. I really admire the space that you hold,
Hmm.
and I'm so happy that we have known each other for a long time and we've connected in different ways. But I'm so happy that we are spending more and more time, like continuingly to be connected.
This whole series, Chrissy, is about money stories, and we were on a group meeting not that long ago, and we ended up really diving into money stories, and it really came apparent that it's time to talk about it. It's time to break the cycles and the patterns of our money stories. And I will say that for most of us, money is something that is painful, that is suffering, that is difficult. And even those who have plenty of money are suffering and are in pain as well. So it's interesting how we can sort of perceive a certain thing, um, but you have to really get to know both sides of that, right? And so when you look back at your childhood, do you have any early memories of a money story?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because um, these memories have have just sort of come to the forefront for me because I've been diving into like working on my own money story. Um, and I'm learning now more and more like how much is already kind of ingrained in you at such a young age. And since that information kind of came to me, I started thinking more about my childhood. because primarily, like for me, when I'm thinking about my money story, I'm thinking about right now. But it wasn't until like I started hearing more about neuroscience and like how our brains are like really hardwired at such a young age for certain things that that I started to realize where my money story began.
Mm.
And so for me, like the thing that comes to me first is that my parents were really young when they had me. And so there was struggle, right? They were trying to make ends meet, and I was spending a lot of time with my grandparents, and they were working shift work, and you know, everything everything was kind of this struggle. As I grew and my parents, like my parents have actually done like extremely well for themselves considering how they started, right? But as we kind of like went along, it was like, what I saw was that, okay, money is really hard work. Money is a lot of sacrifice.
Mm.
Money is like big stress. Purchasing something for yourself is a massive deal. Like, you know, um, there's a lot of energy that goes into money, and it can kind of take over everything, right? Yeah, it's just so fascinating because now when I think about like, okay, so how has money been like for me? Like, when I started getting old enough to manage my own money, make my own money. Well, I thought I'm not working hard enough to make good money. And when money came to me, it was almost like I was scared of it. I had to just get rid of it right away. And so I was terrible at saving money. I would get, I would be really like excited and kind of like proud of myself when I would have enough money that I could save. But then I would make some ridiculous purchase that didn't make sense. Like that happened sometimes. Or I would just, you know, and just like, oh, I just needed to get rid of it for some reason. And it was like, and part of me is like, I guess I didn't feel like I was worthy enough maybe to have money,
Mm.
or like that feeling of like I didn't actually really work hard enough and I haven't sacrificed enough. So I don't know, I'm not really supposed to have this.
Mm.
It's strange mindset.
Yeah.
Um, but also like, I am an artist, like to the core of my being, I am an artist. And in my whole entire life, I have been told, and not this isn't by my parents, this is just society,
Yes.
that artists are starving. Artists can't make it. Artists don't make money. Artists have to sacrifice every single other piece of their life to make their art, right? And so for me, I knew my whole life that I was an artist to the core, but I could never give myself permission to just do that because I automatically thought, well, I'll never be able to survive. I'll never be able to feed myself. I'm never going to make a dollar off of this. Like, this isn't something that can be a career, you know? And it's really sad. It's really, really sad how we carry these stories because they're not true.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not true. And that's the same story that healers carry. It's one that I can relate to because as a healer, we're also told that we should give the gift of healing. And now, don't get me wrong, we all understand that a person who is seeking assistance in their life, in their journey, can only heal themselves, but the healer creates the container for that person to have that healing. And the same society story always says that a healer should not take money, should not be paid for this gift that they have. And so I can totally relate to that because it's this stigma. And there's a lot of people who believe it as well, like strongly believe it. They get mad at you if you don't offer it for free, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you know what's interesting too? There's two parts to this. You just reminded me of it was in 2006, I was doing a yoga training with Paula Tercey. She's beautiful, beautiful being. And at one point in the training, you know, that we started talking about the logistics of teaching, and then she was talking about offering it as a service, right? And how do you charge and this and that. And in the room, it was all over the place, the thoughts about charging for yoga classes, right? And and she just said, like, listen, you're offering a service and you're using your energy. You absolutely deserve to be paid for that. And I just remember how that landed in me. It was kind of like, really? Like,
Mhm.
I deserve that?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. Like, I am offering something and there is an exchange there, you know, and that's okay. It was like I needed that permission,
Mhm.
you know, and that was like kind of one part for me that kind of started this tipping of the money story. There was still a long journey ahead and I'm still on it, but just hearing that and like kind of feeling that permission and having this other perspective, because another piece of it too is that, you know, coming from being an artist, and to me, like, teaching yoga and practicing yoga is right there with my art. It is such a sacred practice and a sacred offering, and it means so much to me that I think, like, we have gotten it all wrong in the sense that, like, we look at money as like we have to work hard and almost be like disconnected from it in order for it to like have value or for us to receive it. And if it's something really sacred and you love doing it and you find joy in it, well, then you shouldn't be paid. Like, right? There's that disconnect. And that's where we got it wrong. Because isn't the whole point of life to be living in joy and to be like offering your gifts and to be able to put food on your table and survive? Like, I
Yeah.
would rather be somebody who is so fully themselves and offering their gifts. Like, I would rather pay those people than big corporations that are totally disconnected from their customers. Do you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a really, really interesting journey that's like so it's woven so deep into all these different areas of ourselves, right?
And I do think that it does actually sort of, when you start unraveling that ball of yarn, it comes down to self-worth. Like it really, really does, right? And
Yeah.
and I think in that self-worth, there's shame. Shame has been brought into that picture as well. And I'm, I'm just getting a ping here to talk a little bit about some organized religions. And I was just thinking about how, you know, churches create these sacred spaces for people to congregate together and share and, whatever in the word of God or whatever be the case. And they ask for money,
Mm-hmm. Yes, they
right?
do.
Like they do. They ask for money every time, right? And
Yep.
actually, and I remember, I mean, I have a memory, and this was something that popped up too as I've been reflecting on the story of money. I clearly remember mom and dad struggling, three kids, right? And going to church and being expected to donate 20% of their salary to the church.
Wow.
And I remember my mom and dad having conversations about that, saying, like, we can't, like, we got to feed the kids. Like sometimes it was a choice, but there was an expectation from the church that you had to pay money, right? So I'm just thinking about that whole concept of, you know, churches are wonderful, religion is it works for some people, whatever. We're not here to have that conversation today, but it's like they also asked for money in in exchange for the word of God, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
totally did. and so so this is actually just showing up for us right now is like, and so why is it that when we work from a place like you as an artist and you're giving from your heart space and it's a sacred practice, why is that not okay to ask for money for in return for that? As I do my work as a shaman, how come it's not okay to ask for money for that in return? Like it's really interesting the dynamics of society and how we have given so much power to this creation that humanity created. This is money is not natural, right?
Right.
It
Yeah.
is not growing in the forest, okay?
Right.
And so how is it that as humans we've given so much power to this thing called money? And in giving that power, we have stripped humanity to a place of, low self-worth and shame if you don't have it and if you have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you can't win either way.
No, no, you can't.
So some of it I think too is that, you know, because we created money, we also created like the value of it. And we all hold value in a different way, right? Like what you value, I might not value in the same way. And so we're not necessarily on the same page with it, right? And as humans, we take comfort in like, all everyone feeling the same about something. We don't want to be left out. We want to, and so it like guess it just so happens that in our day and age anyway, like, the value that we've put on like right now in society, it seems like we're valuing more things over connection, right? And so I don't know, it shifts your that perspective a lot, and it's confusing,
Yeah.
right? It's confusing.
Yes. Yeah. And it actually just brought up a thought around if we want to change the story and the vibrational frequency of our story around money, and we see another story that we really like that story, maybe we can take away the power of money and make it a neutral energy, and then take that neutrality, that balanced energy, if you will, and do so much good with it. And so how do we go from this story to this new story? And it just reminded me of something that we learned in network marketing is like surround yourself with the people who are are living that story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like step
Yeah.
into and surround yourself with those people, and then your story can change because you're putting yourself in a different energetic frequency, if you will.
There was another moment in my life where there was a big shift. My husband is very like business minded, and he's very good with money, and he like it's almost like, and this is something that used to bug me actually, but now I admire it. It was like he was emotionally detached from it. And I was so emotionally stuck with it. Like it seemed like, and I was like, how can he just like do that? How can he just like make those decisions and just be okay with it and stuff, and it used to bug me. And it was because I couldn't, and I was like wrapped up in it emotionally. And he said once, he's just like, money's just a tool. It's just a tool to get you to where it is that you want to go or what you want to do. And I was like, that just like hit me over the head. I was like, oh, yeah, it's just a tool. And when you think about tools, if you're building something, those tools only do what you give them the power to do. Tools are not making the table or making the cuts or doing that, it's you. You're the one giving it the power. And so it was like, huh, oh, so like I have way more control than I think I do.
Yeah.
I actually have to live in lack or scarcity. I can use this tool to build abundance. Huh. okay, so now the power is shifted into my hands. And
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be this gross, ugly thing that, you know, it can be used to serve, to help, to create beauty, to create, you know, abundance, to help people thrive over sucking energy and taking those things away, which was what I really like didn't realize how strong that perspective was in me.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of space energetically when we are constantly worried about money. Like, so taking ourselves to present day, like the economy is a mess.
Yeah.
You know, life, it's chaotic out there. There's all kinds of threats of this, the food, everything, like, and it's just like, oh, and let's not even go down the rabbit hole, how much it costs to buy a head of broccoli these days is crazy, right? We don't even realize as consumers how much power we have. If
Yeah.
we just stop buying, grow our own food, guess what? Prices are going to come down, right? Like we just don't recognize the power that we have. And it just blows my mind. But it starts with one person at a time and then it becomes a collective thing and then it has a huge impact, right? But
I was going to say, and I just think that like a big thing about our money stories, it is our mindset, right? And if we're only focusing, like going back to my story, if I'm only focusing on how hard it is and how much of a struggle it is and how much, that's all I'm going to get because it is energy, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah. And so, like, kind of that first part of shifting your money story, you have to shift your mindset around it.
absolutely. Well, you have to be willing to. I think at
Yes.
some point we kind of just, for most of us, we decide enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
decide enough. And there has to be some sort of pivotal moment that takes us to that breaking point and says, I am done. I'm done, right? I'm just
Yeah.
done. And then it's deciding, and then it's like those money stories, if we still attach emotion to them, then they still run us, right? So we need to heal the emotions around that. Absolutely, for sure. But then it's also about taking action of, well, what's the new story? What's the new belief, right? And you touched on that before. It's like, well, if money is only a tool, then I can use this tool to do XYZ, right? But it's making that decision to do that. And then making sure that you're surrounded by the people who are like, we're doing it. I want to take us a little bit into the ancestral story. Are you aware of the stories of your ancestors, like your grandparents and your great grandparents? Like, what's the story there that is attached to their money story? Are you aware of what that is?
Yeah, yeah, there are some pieces that are there. One piece is that on my mom's side, my grandparents moved here from Scotland, like many people did, because there's more opportunity in Canada. So you uproot your whole entire family, whether the rest of the family wants to do that or not, for financial opportunity. So that's a lot of power that money has, right? It's
Yeah.
it's shifting your entire family dynamic, your entire family unit. It's separating you from the rest of your family, and there was struggle there. My grandma didn't want to come here, and because of the time, and because she had four kids, and she was home with the kids. She wasn't working at first. She did actually work quite a bit, but like the choice probably wasn't really hers, right? Because she's not the one that's going to bring in the money. So this perception of, well, if you make the money, you get to make the choices. If you don't make the money, you don't get to make the choices. That
Mm.
was a that showed up for me once I was married.
Ah, that's a big one.
It
Yeah.
is a big. I've never spoken about this before, actually. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I lived that story within myself to like to the point that like, I projected it onto my husband at times.
Mhm.
And it totally wasn't his story whatsoever. You know, but I just felt that way so strongly. Like I don't deserve to make big financial decisions because I'm not making enough money. But I'm raising a child, you know, I'm doing all of these other things that are just as valuable. But when I grew up, the value was set that if you make the money, you make the decisions, right?
It's a big one. That's
That's a big,
that was actually a forgotten one for me, but that's a big one. Yes.
yeah, it's massive. It's
So
massive.
look at the power again that we gave that through the family dynamics not
Mm,
that long ago, and I'm sure it still exists today in certain cultures, right? Like if the man is the breadwinner, then he makes all the decisions on how things are spent. And yeah, that's actually a really big one. That's a podcast in itself.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then another story that comes to mind is on my dad's side. So I can remember my grandma saved everything, like sour cream containers, tin foil, like all of these things that now we just recycle them or throw them out, right? But she saved it all. And after she passed, I cleaned out her trailer and I was like, wow, like that was the moment where I really realized like where her mind was. Like she grew up in a time where you didn't have access to as much as we do now. So you did save things and you recycled things. But which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was almost like um it wasn't it's not that she was a hoarder, but it's almost like that hoarding mentality, like it's fear, like I don't want to feel in lack or not have the tools that I need for my life, so I just need to like hold on to all of it. And that's totally connected to money, because if you feel like you can afford tinfoil or whatever it is, then you're not going to save it in the same way. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it was just like, wow, there was a few things in that experience. It was like, wow, we really live a disposable life now, and that's not so good. But also just like, yeah, just a totally different lifestyle. Like she grew up obviously in like a totally different money story than my parents did, or my dad did, or I did, right? And it's just interesting to see how that was woven into her even till the end of her life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do remember I had a really good friend who was taking care of her grandparents and her grandmother in particular. And her grandmother was like she was the survivor of the war, right? And their mentality around uh, food is interesting. Like they grew up in scarcity. They starved. Like, that is part of their story. And um, when she passed away, this grandmother, she had 5 freezers in the basement and shelves and shelves and shelves of canned goods that were sitting on those shelves for like 30, 40 years. Like she just hoarded food. She spent hundreds of dollars a week like putting all of this food in her house, making sure she would never run out, right? And so there's also a disconnect of having then at some point in your life where you have the money and then you feel like you have to accumulate, right? To never be without,
Yeah.
and that sort of survival thing too. So yeah, it's just really amazing how, as you said earlier, intricate and woven these stories are for us when we look at our ancestors, when we look at our own childhood experiences, and we look at today, like how we're living today, right? Like it's really fascinating. So, do you remember Was there one or maybe more than one pivotal moment where you said, I am fucking done? Like, I'm done with this old story, this old belief, this old, like, I am stepping out of this. I am done with it. Do you remember that pivotal moment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there was like glimpses of it leading up to, but I started really not feeling well physically. I was having a really hard time um with my energy, with my like storing iron and B12 in my body, and I was, at this point where I was maybe going to have a hysterectomy, and all this stuff was happening. And I like, I had weeks of not being able to get up off the couch, and it was affecting me, like affecting my mental health. It was affecting everything. Right. And I kind of just got to the point where I was so tired of being sick, and it was affecting like my ability to work and my relationships. And it was all of that. And I I don't know exactly when I connected that there was part, like my money story was also part of it, but it was just like this worth thing. It was almost like I felt like so much was taken away from me because of how I felt, that it really showed me what was important to me. And I was, well, first I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was like, how am I going to get myself out of this? And just the thought of like not being able to like really be there for my family, like physically and mentally, but also like I wasn't able to work as much. And and then at one point, like my husband got injured, and so he couldn't work in the same way for a little bit, right? And honestly, like that scared the crap out of me, because I was like, what are we gonna do? Like, you know, you go from being young and working and having all these ideas of what you want to do in life, and then, got married, and then, oh, I have a kid, I have this baby. Well, I'm not going to work. I want to be home with my baby. Like, I'm going to raise my child, right? So you make the sacrifice financially, right? And that's hard. That's really hard. And that's where all of those pieces came up, where like I can't make decisions because I'm not making enough money, because I was home raising my son. Which, why did I not put enough value on that? That's crazy. But over time, as I started to not feel good physically, that was kind of like the breaking point. Honestly, like this might sound like a weird push, but things come to us in our own ways. But I remember I was sitting in the doctor's office at the specialist, and this woman was talking to me about a hysterectomy, and she was so disconnected and just matter of fact, this is just what you're going to do. And I had all these questions, and she didn't answer any of them. And I felt really scared.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm not doing this, at least not right now. And I said, I have to give myself a year, because I didn't feel safe in that scenario, like going under the knife, and
Yeah.
not feeling safe about like what happens next, right? How is this going to change my life? It
Mhm.
was a very like, what do you mean? Nothing, there isn't going to be any side effects. It's going to be fine. You're going to feel great. Um, my whole body said no, no,
Mhm.
no, 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 no. And
Mhm.
so I said to myself, okay, I'm going to give myself a year and see if I can do this on my own, like figure out a better way. And a big piece of that was that there's another situation where I felt like my power is being taken away from me. And I was like, fuck no,
Mhm.
no, no more. Like, and so for me, it was like, I'm going to take my power back. I'm going to protect my body. I'm going to learn more about my body and all of these things. And by going to my body, that's when all of these things started shifting with the money story. Because when you start to feel better physically, your self-worth changes,
Mhm.
right? And And also, I mean, luckily I ended up in that journey finding this community that was also on this journey of like, we're going to shift some stories here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers to that journey, right? And like having people that are like, no, 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 what if you look at it like this, right? Like that was slowly, slowly, slowly working me out of these old patterns and helping me feel empowered. And, we're working this business where I'm like starting to feel better physically, but I'm also starting to make a little bit of money. And honestly, just the little bit of money that I started making at first was massive because it was mine. It wasn't connected to the rest of my family because we run a business. And so a lot of my work
Mhm.
um, outside of my art practice was for the business. So it wasn't just mine, right? And decisions weren't just mine in that space. And I didn't really realize how much I needed that. I needed it. I needed to like feel empowered financially.
You needed to own it.
I needed to own it. Yeah. And like now it's shifting into this whole like to be able to be like, it's just a tool and I'm the one using the tool. I'm the one that gives it power, not anything else. Like honestly, if I think back like even 4 years ago, there was no way I would think that.
Hmm.
So
But
like so
I think about your practice as an artist, and you have your paints and you have your paper or your canvas and you have your brushes. And are those tools uh dictating how you are in the world? No,
no.
they're not, right? And so how is it that this piece of paper or this coin, if you will, money, right? How is it that we have given it so much power?
I've started to play with this idea of manifestation and more for, not like, oh, I'm just going to sit and dream my life away. Like it's a way of harnessing action for yourself, right? And getting clear about what you want. But in that, I realized that like how powerful it is what we think about every day, the energy that we choose to live in every day, and what massive effect that has on us. And
Mm.
so when you think about your finances, if you're always thinking, I don't have enough, I'm not enough, it's a struggle, that's all you're going to get.
Yeah, more
Because,
of like attracts like, right? We know
right,
that. Yeah.
right. If money's just a tool, then let's use it to attract more of it.
Yeah. More tools. It also reminds me, the art of manifestation is an interesting art. I've been on that path for many years, studying it. And I'm totally transparent. I have not mastered that. Money still shows up in lack in some ways in my life. But what I have noticed is that, what I focus my attention with intention, and when I tap into the intention and the frequency, the vibrational frequency of, abundance, and we'll say abundance in work, or I don't even specify like where I want that abundance to come from because I don't want to limit the cosmos from providing, right? But when I actually spend the intention and just really tapping into that frequency of abundance, I recognize very quickly that we are constantly surrounded by abundance. Look at
Yeah.
nature. She gives us everything we need, right? And when I tap in, and I'm just as I'm sharing that, I'm getting like a lot of goosebumps. And so when I tap into that, like I'm not even tapping into the thing called money. I'm tapping into the abundance. And I look around me and I see the beauty and I see everything that Mother Nature gives us. And like we do not need to starve. There's so much for us out there. When I tap into that energy, then it has a ripple effect on all aspects on how money comes into my life,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
the frequency that we need to tap into. And it's a beautiful thing, a totally beautiful thing. For you, Chrissy, so when you made that realization after you were sick and you started to feel better, you started to bring your power back to you, where are you now in your money story? Are you still emotionally connected to it's hard? You have to suffer, you have to work super hard and sacrifice. Are you still connected to those pieces of your story, or are you somewhere else now?
Well, I think that there is always a little bit of it there. I'm definitely in a much, much, much better place. I know I still have work to do. One thing that I just learned recently, which I thought was interesting, was about how when we're hardwired a certain way at a young age, we don't necessarily like unplug and replug in. It's that we have to bypass it. And so that's where I'm at right now. Like it's much easier for me to bypass because I have the awareness of the pattern. And
Mhm.
so when things start to come up and I get those feelings like, oh, this is gonna be hard and oh, there's not going to be enough, I can very, very quickly now like almost just say stop.
Yeah,
That's not true.
yeah.
Look at look at where you are and what you're doing and what you've accomplished.
Mhm.
You know, it's actually so fascinating to me because at one point I felt like I was going to be in debt for the rest of my life. And it wasn't massive debt that I had, but it was energy wise, it was very heavy for me. And every time I would look at like, credit card debt or like this line of credit that I had for my business, and it was just like, it's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. Blah, 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 blah. But as soon as I started learning how to shift and feeling better in my body and starting to like shift my mindset, I literally paid off all my debt like really fast. And I was like, whoa. And it actually took me a little bit of time to not like to get used to it. I was like, I'd have these moments of like, oh, I have this heaviness of debt. And I'd be like, oh wait, oh no, I don't. I paid that off. It's like because I'm so used to feeling that way. And then it
Yeah.
was just but then it got exciting. It was like, well, what else can I do? What else can I do? And so I've been like, just investing in my family and investing in other things and like growing all these other pieces for us where like, you know, I feel so proud of myself.
Mhm.
And, talking about the energy, one thing that I did that was like a little hack for myself is that because this debt piece was really like really heavy for a long time, that anytime I had to pay like my phone bill or my hydro bill, I treated it as if I was paying myself.
Mhm.
And it shifted from like, oh, I'm giving all my money away to like, oh, I'm investing in myself. I'm
Mhm.
investing in myself. And it's the same with like, paying for certain things for my health. I don't look at it as like, oh man, I gotta like I'm like, I'm investing in my health and I feel fantastic. So this has been a great investment. Like,
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love that you changed the bills because let's face it, they come no matter what every month. They know they show up. And I have listened to a lot of different, teachings out there through the years, but one of the best teachings I ever got around that in particular was a beautiful soul sister of mine. I remember reaching out to her and I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she says, "Oh, I'm writing love letters." I said, "You're writing love letters?" I said, "Who are you writing love letters to?" She says, "Oh, Manitoba Hydro, um, the phone company." And I'm like, I wasn't understanding, right? I was like, "What do you mean you're writing love letters to these bills, right?" And she goes, "Well," she goes, my mindset is that they are not the enemy. They help, right? It brings electricity. I'm grateful for the electricity. I'm grateful for the communication. I'm grateful for this, that, and the other thing. So every time I pay a bill, what I'm essentially doing is she says, I actually draw little hearts on the paper bill and I write, I love you on it when I send that money. And I thought, oh my goodness, I gotta adopt that, right? Like, I so gotta adopt that. And so I did. I started doing that, and it totally changed that dread, of feeling like, oh, another freaking bill. Like, how am I going to afford that? Da 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 da. It's like, oh no, I'm going to send love to that because it does provide me heat in my, it's like part of what Mother Nature is giving me. So I'm setting the intention to say thank you, right? And so it really, really changed and shifted things for me in a big way. Big way.
Yeah.
We're coming to an end pretty close here. So I want to just take a few moments with you. And if you could, share any tips or tricks or anything more, anything that you want to say to those that are really stuck in their money stories and are feeling the pain and feeling the suffering and just really struggling and having a really hard time, like what would you want to share with them? What do you want our listeners to hear today to land for them in their heart space?
Hmm. I think the biggest thing is, really taking time to be aware of how you talk to yourself about money. Like, what is your story that's coming up? Because we often just kind of are in the motion of it and we don't step back and really pay attention and listen to it and try to do like what we were just doing, like kind of going back a little bit, like, what maybe were you kind of unintentionally told as a child or noticed in your grandparents or, um, taking that time and yeah, working on those little shifts, to change the perspective because the fact is we need money. It actually is a really amazing tool because once we are in a space where, you know, we can feel better about it and that we are willing to receive it, well, then we can share that tool in so many ways that we maybe can't see. You maybe can't see when you're in the thick of the struggle, right? But it takes action, right? Action cures doubt, action cures the struggle
Mhm.
because you got to move forward. You got to shift the energy into moving out of it rather than just kind of waiting in the waters of the struggle.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that as well because, and this is something that was shared with me from one of my mentors. She said, you will always get what you tolerate.
Mm, yeah, that's a good one.
And,
That's a,
and so when we're looking at taking action, be clear on what it is you're already tolerating, right?
mm-hmm.
Always going to get that until you raise the bar. And whatever
Yeah,
that looks like, raising that bar can just be like you shared, taking a moment to look at your money stories, being
yeah,
the observer when they're showing up, you know, saying no, that's no longer my story. I'm changing my perception. Like it's taking those action steps, right? But
yeah,
we will always get what we tolerate. And that is something I have been very much aware of in the last year in my own money story is like, oh, I've always tolerated being in the hole, being in the
mm,
overdraft, being in debt. I've always tolerated that. And that's a money story from university days, right? Like, and so it's interesting. It's like, I'm very much aware of it. And that's actually comfortable. Like, I've been comfortable there for a long time, right? So it's like, yeah, we really need to be aware of what we're tolerating.
yeah. I think a really important thing too, and this was a really hard one for me actually, like being an artist, I tend to reside on one side of the brain and numbers tend to reside on the other side of the brain. And so for me, like I wouldn't even look at my money. Like I
Mm.
wouldn't look at numbers. I would almost be scared of it, right?
Yeah.
And part of that action for some people, the most important piece might be sit down and look at it all.
Yes.
Because what happened to me anyway, was like oh, when I actually looked at it, I was like, oh, this is not that scary. I can manage this. And that shift, like, I'm not creating more debt now. I'm creating more assets
Mm-hmm.
because I manage it in a different way. I'm not scared of it. And I'm
Yeah.
not, it's not paralyzing me.
Yeah, that's actually a really important one too. And that is something that in my business, I started to practice about 3 years ago. It was like, I can't remember the exact words, but the work was that if you are not willing to look at your debt and your bills and everything that it costs for your business, you are not honoring that part of the money story.
mm,
Right? And so you do need to look at it and you need to manage it like it matters. Because
yeah.
I actually gave that duty to my husband, who was the accountant. So I have no idea if my business was making any money or not. I paid no attention to it. I did not own it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want to see it. And then when things shifted and I needed to own it, it was like, wow, I had no idea that the money was going here, here, and here. The stress, the fear, the shame, all of those emotions that I'm feeling, it's not always about making more. Sometimes it's about managing what you got.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then really understanding is like, holy, I can make some changes here. I have
Yeah.
control over this. Right. And so now as I
Yeah.
run my business, every month I know exactly if I'm making any money or not making any money. Like I know from month to month where I'm at. I could never have told you that before. So
Mm,
part of changing our money story has a lot to do with managing the expense part of it, you know?
yeah. Yeah.
And giving love letters to the expense part of that too, because our businesses need XYZ to run so the business can run. And so it's like being grateful that we have these tools that we can share our gifts to the world. So any last tips before we close today, Chrissy? Anything at all coming to you?
I think just that if you're sitting in a place where you feel like you are not deserving of more money or you're not deserving of abundance in your life, that it's not true. We
Mm,
all are. And I believe the whole purpose of our life is to experience joy and love. And we need to, turn that towards ourselves first.
mm.
And that money piece needs that love, right? So that
Yeah,
you can.
I love that. Thank you so, so much. That's beautiful, beautiful wisdom. So, thank you, all the listeners that have tuned in today. And we thank you, Chrissy, for your time and your beautiful sacred space and sharing your wisdom and your stories with us. And I know that this will land true for many of those listening out there, and it will. Sometimes it's just taking that one action step, whatever that might be, right? And yeah, so thank you so much for sharing space with us today, and I look forward to to continuing this conversation with many of our other soul sisters in our community. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. This was really fun.